So I've been sleuthing around the internet to get people's take on VR that aren't actually in VR yet, and what I found was absolutely crazy. There are tons of misconceptions about VR that seem to be holding a lot of people back. So here are the top 4 myths or lies, whatever you want to call them, about VR debunked. First off, let's address the elephant in the room, and that's of course the price. I've seen comments around way too often along the lines of, VR is just way too expensive. I don't have thousands of dollars to throw at it. Now, I want to start off by saying yes, there are certainly cheaper ways to play video games than VR, but there's also no way to experience video games like you can in VR. Of course, when virtual reality first really hit the consumer market back in 2016, not only were headsets super expensive, but you also needed a badass PC to run those games. Now, 3 years later, this has definitely changed, but I can see where the stigma comes from. Right now, you can get a good entry-level VR headset ranging all the way down from $200 to, the high end like the Valve Index or Vive Pro or Pimax 8K that, can easily exceed $1,000. But the cool thing is that even if you buy the cheapest PC headset that you could find in the Windows Mixed Reality category, it essentially does the exact same thing as the most expensive headset. You just missed out on some of the cutting edge features. Like I always say, and I think that you should too, if you're in VR, that's all that matters. Something of a mix between the high end and low end of headsets is the Oculus Rift S. At only $399, it's crushing the market right now, and that's for good reason. And if the price of a decent PC plus an HMD is too much for you, then you actually have good options as alternatives that can significantly cut down on the price. First, there's PlayStation VR, which has a reputation for some of the best exclusive VR games out there, and can be had cheaper than any PC plus HMD combo. Of course, you don't get the best visual clarity or controllers or tracking, but it's still freaking virtual reality. And my favorite budget option is the Oculus Quest. $399, no PC, no console, wireless VR, and good games. And if you want to build a PC or get one later, you could easily use the Oculus Quest as a PC VR headset through something like ALVR. Really, the prohibitive costs of VR are pretty outdated. While I think the prices could and should still come down, if you have the money to afford a modern gaming console, then you actually have enough money to afford VR, which is pretty sick if you ask me. The next totally antiquated misconception about VR is that you need to have a super expensive, ultra powerful, top-of-the-line PC for VR to even be worth it. And there honestly couldn't be a sentiment further from the truth. One of my first videos on this channel was showing off how accessible playing VR is with a cheap PC, showcasing a $400 computer that not only plays VR games perfectly fine, but also recorded that footage on OBS at the same time. I think you'd be surprised that if you have a modern PC that plays most of your flat games, you can probably get by with VR on that same PC. Of course, the headset that you choose can make a big difference. You obviously need a bigger PC if you're going to use something like the Valve Index due to a higher resolution, and if you really want to take advantage of its perks like the refresh rate, you need that extra horsepower. But I can't imagine you'd spend $1,000 on a headset and not have a decent PC to run it. But back to debunking. You don't need a super powerful or expensive PC to run VR, especially if you're using the headsets that make up the vast majority of VR players. Original Oculus Rift, the newer Rift S, HTC Vive, first gen Windows Mixed Reality, you can easily get by with a GTX 1060 or even a 1050 Ti. I have a buddy that plays all of his VR games on a 1050 Ti matched with the Rift S, and he's got no complaints. What I'm trying to say is that you don't need the crazy top-of-the-line PC to play VR anymore. If you play games on your computer now, there's a decent chance that you may have the capability to run VR and you just never knew it. But that also brings me back to the PSVR and Oculus Quest. You don't even need a computer at all for these headsets. So in the case where having a PC is cost prohibitive, or you just have something against Windows, these are totally great options to play in VR that you don't even need a PC for. One runs off of a console and the other runs off of built-in hardware, all in one package, baby. Okay, next. So you are interested in virtual reality, but there hasn't been a game or experience that interests you. Unfortunately, a ton of great VR games really don't get the publicity that they deserve. There's not the marketing budget that you have for big games like, on flat screen. Another myth about VR that I see often is there just aren't any good games. And while this too is a sentiment made in truth regarding the past, like when VR first hit the market, oh boy, things have changed. On the PC side, you've got games like Defector, Gorn, Space Junkies, Arizona Sunshine, Pavlov, and not to mention one of my favorite games period, not just limiting to VR, Lone Echo, and its multiplayer component, Echo Combat and Arena. Of course, you've got VR Chat, which I've sunk dozens of hours in, and even just this year of game releases looks insane. Boneworks, Stormland, Asgard's Wrath, and the Quest has some pretty killer titles as well, like Dead and Buried 2, Journey of the Gods, Red Matter. These are also PC games, but they're playable on the Quest without a PC. Plus, you could sideload a bunch of homebrew games and experiences. PlayStation VR has one of the best catalogs of exclusives out there: Firewall, Zero Hour, Resident Evil, Ace Combat. Look, I can literally list games that are good in VR all freaking day long. Of course, I want more and bigger games to come to VR. I've got a couple that I play now, but that's really about it. I've played through the whole catalog. But if you are new to VR, there is a huge catalog of great games to sink your time into no matter what sort of game you fancy. Also, games that you loved playing on a flat screen tend to feel like a totally and complete different experience in VR. A great example of this is both No Man's Sky and Skyrim VR, two games that I enjoyed playing flat, but that same game in VR feels like a totally different beast. You really can't beat the immersion, there's nothing like it. And finally, the one that bugs me the absolute most. Nobody even has VR. There's like 2 people that are even in it. And if stats are even remotely correct, I gotta say, this one's a big debunk. The PSVR alone has sold nearly 5 million units, and every month there are more than 1 million active headsets on Steam. No, we don't have direct numbers from Oculus, either PC or on the Quest platform, but Oculus alone counts for 50% of all VR hardware on Steam, so needless to say, there are a lot of Oculus users out there. Now, I certainly wouldn't call millions of users nothing, and if you do, that's kind of speaking with a little ignorance. Of course, VR isn't as big as its flat screen brother, but it has been growing incredibly fast with more and more users every single day, and we could only expect that graph to exponentially increase as the word gets out about it. Really, when you take a look at it, VR in its current state has been around for less time than even the current generation of game consoles. It's new, it's changing, and it's evolved incredibly quick since its original launch. So of course, through the growing pains, the processes of lowering prices, as well as releasing good games, you have to look at the cycle of game development. This stuff takes time, and it's finally at the point now where these great games are coming out. But it's somewhat understandable that the general public may believe all of these myths, and it may just turn them off to VR. And that's why I'm asking you guys, if you see any sort of talk about you need a $2,000 PC and an expensive headset to play 0 games and be alone in VR, send them this video and set them straight. As VR users, we all know what's up, but really, we should be proud of how far VR has gotten in the past few years, and one thing I could be absolutely certain of is that it's only gonna get better and better. Are there any other myths or lies that you've come across that, really need debunking? Because if this video does well, I might just do another one, maybe have a little bit more fun with it. Don't forget to like this video if you loved it, subscribe if you want more of it, and hit that freaking bell if you just can't live without it. Much love, Thrill out.